Radio 970 WFLA.
Well. Welcome in there, fun seekers. 7.5 minutes after the hour of 3 o'clock. It is what is it anyway? Yeah, it's a Tuesday, May 16th, 1989. You know how it is after a long weekend. It takes a few days to get up and running again. By the way, speaking of up and running again, actually, I'll get to that in a moment. Tomorrow afternoon, we'll be in Slade Steele's living room for all, that's worth. It's a big day for Slade. The rest of you, what could you care less, right? You better believe it. Speaking of up and running, I had something happen to me Saturday morning, like I just can hardly... We went up to Wakulla Springs, okay, and we took a nice leisurely way up and stayed in Cedar Key, of all strange places. Cedar Key, Friday night, really neat town. I mean, a really super neat town. Unfortunately, it's like 25 miles to the nearest convenience store from Cedar Key, and it's another 110 miles to anything from there. But nonetheless, a really neat town, and I get up Saturday morning, and I don't really think there's any way to tell you guys this story. I don't really... It was... I have a lot of bad luck with motels and Muffy, okay? Muffy tells a great story concerning the first time we ever stayed at a motel, a Motel 6 in Miami. But it's a great story, and there are a lot of... Every time we go to... Okay, we didn't have any reservations in Cedar Key, and we pull into town, and there's this really nice motel, and it says vacancy, and so I go inside, and the guy says, well, basically we like to rent out for a couple of nights at a time, not just one. And I said, well, hey, great, when I'm staying a couple of nights, that's the way I like to rent them, but I'm only staying one. And he said, well, we set aside a couple of rooms for that purpose, and actually what it is, it's a condominium, and you can have it for one night for $100. 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, really nice condominium. It's probably a great price. Except, she, 100, oh, God, that's a lot of money, and everything. And I said, well, and Muffy, who has a lot more gazunk. Any place else in town that's decent? I would have never had the nerve to ask. And the guy said, well, yeah, there's this place down the road. You turn right here, you turn left there, you go to the other place, up and down and around the block. Which is kind of amusing because, we had just gotten into Cedar Key, and we didn't realize that you can virtually see the entire island from any point on it. All he had to do was point. And so we come out to the car, and I said, God, honey, did you catch any of those directions? And she said, no, I didn't catch any of them either. And we were talking about a place that's, primarily 4 square blocks. There just can't be that many turns involved, and there aren't any one-way streets. So nonetheless, we get in the car, and we start cruising, and there's this nice, and it's an older little motel, but I saw that they had some porch swings under a gazebo type of thing out by the Gulf, and I said, let's stay here. And it was $30 a night. $30 a night, of course, is relatively inexpensive. And which really, I'll tell you what really ticked me off is that for $30, I'm sitting out there, with a Lincoln, the gold, the whole bit, the gold MasterCard, and the guy checks my credit card for $30 in front of me. But that's okay. The room was acceptable, and we had a really nice night. We had a great time. We found a fantastic little bar, had a great meal, went back, had a fair night's sleep, got up the next morning. I went in and I sat down in the smallest room in the suite, and it was one of those deals where every time you got up, the system would say, no, you don't. Back down there, boy. I ain't finished yet. Toilet wouldn't flush. When you'd flush it, it would take about 1% of one. For over an hour, or at least it seemed like over an hour. It probably was. Muffy could tell you better than that, because towards the end, she started giggling. I stood there flushing. What else was he going to do? Well, several things happened since last we chatted, didn't they? I want to tell you, when I came home and started reading through the paper, that Bushy guy, he is unbelievable. Absolutely. Talk about tough on crime. Only 15 rounds in a clip. Is this guy tough on crime or what, huh? 15 rounds, that's... Whoa. I'd also like to take this time to apologize for a statement that I made regarding an incident which took place several Saturdays ago. On Monday, April 24th, I used my position on WFLA to make some damaging accusations that were untrue. The incident I refer to happened at a place I described as that very large bicycle shop on McDill Avenue. Well, without going into any more detail, I'd like to say that I took a set of unusual circumstances, misinterpreted them completely, and formed a hasty, wrong conclusion. Somehow, I transferred the experience into hostility and violence on the air and voiced it on the air. These people did not mistreat me. Since that time, I've learned they have a well-deserved and excellent reputation, one that they have worked diligently for 26 years to achieve. I apologize to the staff and management of the bicycle shop, and I apologize to my listeners for taking advantage of my position to say things that I did.
To give you dudes like a totally awesome demonstration.
About 3 years ago, at a place called Tyrone Square Mall, it was back when I was working at the other station with David Fowler and Tim Coles, and we were doing this kind of talk show host battle of the talk show hosts, if you will. And a combination, God, it was really hilarious, and a combination health fair at the Tyrone Square Mall, and it just went on and on and on and on forever. And I remember arriving there somewhere in the neighborhood of noon, and I looked out, and there were perhaps 100, 150 chairs set up. And I was standing there trying to get acclimated, and this dear, sweet, yet somehow pathetic little old lady got up from the center of the seats and started waddling. There's literally no other way to phrase it or describe it. Waddling over to the podium, to the stage area. And I could see her coming forever. She just was one of those people that really stood out. Hair was snow white. It was in a bun. Slowly but surely, she made her way over. And she beckoned to me, and I thought that, she was a fan. And I bent down, and she said, "I don't like you." And she turned around, and she started to walk back to her chair. And we're talking about very, very slow. It must have taken this woman a good 2 minutes to walk the 100 feet. Easily. She gets approximately halfway back to the chair, and she does a 180, and she comes back. And again goes through the whole same routine. She beckons to me. I bend down, and she says, "You're ugly." She turns around and goes back. Well, frankly, it was hilarious. That whole afternoon was hilarious. The front row of the people in that shopping mall were, well, there's this very derogatory term, older than dirt. They were absolutely ancient. Many of them were in wheelchairs and walkers and had canes and crutches. They were very elderly people. They probably weren't very nice people either. They were probably rather mean-spirited people because they were fans of one of the other hosts. I won't mention his name. But the one who pandered to the mean-spirited people in this community. The ones who, don't like to spend any money for education. They're the ones that don't want anything but handouts for themselves. People that I don't mind telling you I basically don't like. They're nasty, mean, old people. They're not mean because they're old, but they're old anyway. Things happened that afternoon. Slowly, we were there for 5 hours. Slowly, the audience turned over. Slowly, the walkers and the wheelchairs disappeared. Slowly, the elderly people disappeared. And slowly but surely, that audience turned over into an adult audience, a 25, 54 kind of audience. It took 5 hours to do it. Later that night, I went over to David Fowler's house, and we sat around, and David and I were frankly quite exhilarated. It was a very interesting afternoon, or an early evening for us, and we talked about how things had changed that very day. How that radio station, how perhaps even talk radio in this market had changed that very day. We sat there and watched it happen. We sat there and watched a very mean-spirited element driven, literally driven from the radio station, driven from the stage, driven from the shopping mall. The hero of the mean-spirited people became smaller and smaller and smaller. From that day on, I literally made my mark in this market At least in part by doing a number on people like that, on the befuddled people. I don't apologize for it. I mean, hell, if they were together enough to pick up the phone or to come out to a mall, if they're together enough to vote in a block, then they don't deserve an easy time. They deserve all the grief and aggravation that you can lay on them. I want to talk to you about age. I want to talk to you about the elderly. How we deal with them, how we perceive them, and how they deal with us. 20-year-old Ralph and McDonald's could exist in a small town directly across the street from each other, but that's not my problem, since I own neither McDonald's nor Ralph's. There were a total of 4 customers that I could see in the restaurant. There was my wife and myself sitting at one booth. A little bit ahead of us, there was a young man, perhaps late 20s, early 30s. He looked like a working-class kind of guy, had a motorcycle helmet. He was sitting there eating his lunch quietly. And in a booth ahead of him was a woman, perhaps anywhere from her mid-50s to her late 60s. It was just one of those deals where I couldn't tell for sure. And she was sitting there nursing. No other way to phrase it. No other way to describe it. A small burger of some kind and a cup of coffee. She was sitting in the first booth facing outside, facing the street. The young man was sitting in a booth directly behind her. So her back was to him. He was sitting there wolfing down a good working-class kind of guy's lunch. And Mary and I, having just gotten off the road driving for a couple of hours, we're sitting there as you normally are after a boring, monotonous drive, just kind of staring into space, vegging out, if you will, putting away a burger and a cup of soda. There was a Muzak system on, playing nondescript music. One of those things where you're not even sure it's there. And all of a sudden I realized that the older woman was talking. And she was talking to the young man with a motorcycle helmet, just half turned over her shoulder. And she had been going on for, several seconds anyway, before I caught on, and I just started to eavesdrop. And it became apparent that she was talking about a song on the Muzak system. A song called, and I really feel silly about this, it's either sukiyaki or teriyaki or some kind of yaki, okay? I believe it is from the Flower Drum song, but I can't be positive. But that's what I think it's from. And, I'm just not into that kind of music, but nonetheless, it was one of those monotonous, boring, repetitive songs that I think was popular in the 1950s, the late 1950s. I know I've heard it 1,000 zillion times, and it certainly would not make me unhappy if I never heard it again. And she was telling this young man that the first time she ever heard this song was when her son went into the Army. And he was somewhere in the Asian area, and he had sent this record home to her. And she fell in love with it, and she had several different versions of it, and it was very, very hard for her to get versions of it now. And she had it in different tempos, and she was explaining that the tempo that was being played on the Muzak system was relatively slow, and she had several versions that were much faster, and it made her feel so good, and the guy eating the hamburgers is sitting there saying, yeah. Oh, is that so? Makes you feel good, huh? Good. And she went on for quite a number of minutes. And I'm sitting there and, okay, I'm somewhat of a grump, all right? And the first thing that goes through my mind is, boy, hey, that old lady picked the right guy in this restaurant to talk to, because if she was trying to talk to me, I'd be calling the manager by now. That's the first thing that went through my mind, okay? The guy finishes his lunch. She finishes the story, by the way, first. He finishes his lunch. He gets up. He says goodbye to her, and he walks out the door. And I've had maybe 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 minutes now to think over my initial, what a miserable old bag. What the hell is she bothering that nice guy for kind of reaction? I turned to Mary and I said, there goes probably one of the nicest people on the face of the earth. He's not a very articulate man. The woman would have probably done far better to talk with me, because if I was in the right mood, I would have really talked with her. And he talked to her as much as he possibly could, probably as much as he ever talked to his mom or his wife or his girlfriend. That's just the kind of guy he was. He looked at me like a yup, kind of guy. He said goodbye to her on the way out, which seemed to make her day. And then it was almost like a McDonald's commercial. There was this little black woman, maybe, 4.5 feet tall, if she was that tall, and almost as round, working at McDonald's, cleaning off the tables. Mary and I were getting ready to leave. And again, we're the only people in this McDonald's. And the woman comes over, the black woman comes over, she's wiping off the tables, and the other woman, the teriyaki, sukiyaki, whatever the hell the song is, lady, looks up and says, "Oh, hi, Marge." And Marge says hi, and it was just like a commercial, with the sun streaming through the window, and out the door Mary and I went and got in the car and drove 150 miles or so south. I thought about that woman an awful lot on the way home. She never did say if her son came back from the Army or if he ever comes by or calls her. It's the day after Mother's Day, and she didn't mention whether or not he had brought a new version of the record the day before. 3 hours later, we walk into our house, just finished unloading the car, and the phone is literally ringing. It's a friend on the other end of the phone. Not just any friend, but a very, very, very special friend. As a matter of fact, in all probability, if you are of my generation, he's your friend too. Once or twice I have alluded to him, and I, again, will respect his privacy and won't tell you who he is or all that much about him, except let me say that he's in the entertainment industry, okay? And let me promise you that if you are of my generation, this individual, my friend, your friend, has had a mark on your life. Take my word for that, if you will, please. You've been somewhere, you've heard something, you've done something that you can relate to with this man. Just take my word on it, please. I've not heard from my friend for a long time. Not since last fall. The entire winter had gone by, and now most of the spring, and I hadn't heard from my friend. He used to write to me quite frequently. Now, when I say my friend, let me be perfectly clear on this. It's not a lifelong bosom buddy relationship. This is a man I have seen once in my life. I may never see him again in person. We have exchanged a number of phone calls, perhaps 3 or 4, and maybe a dozen and a half letters over the last year and a half, and yet he's as much my friend as people that I've known almost all of my life. A very special kindred relationship between my friend and myself. I'd written him a letter last week before we went away. Page and a half. Mentioned some things that had gone on in my life. Mentioned that I hadn't heard from him for a while, and that it bothered me, and hoped that I hadn't said or done anything to insult him, and I sent it off. My friend wrote me over I guess it's about a 5.5 page letter, but he wanted to check with me on the telephone before he sent it. He wanted to know if I wanted to hear what he had to say before he actually sent it, if I wanted him to read it. He said it was a pretty tough letter. He said he was angry with me. Maybe even disappointed would be a better word. And I said that I thought I could take it. And he read me a letter that he had written but had yet to send. He, too, started off the letter by telling me some things that had happened in his life since last we had seen each other. About a number of operations, not pleasant ones. About a number of other medical problems that he had, not pleasant ones. And then he let me know in no uncertain terms that I had hurt him very much by being too hard on the elderly. You see, my friend is 30 years older than I am. And the years are starting to catch up with him. And I'm sure he's concerned about it. I'd hurt my friend by being too hard on the elderly. I was stunned. Me, too hard on the elderly? Are you serious? What about Mr. Russell? The guy who was in his 70s when I was not even 10 years old. And what about all the other things that I've done to defend the older people in this country. I mean, all those older people I've been so patient with on the phone. The nice ones. No, I know I have no time for the mean and nasty ones. I have no time for them at all. And the only people I jump on deserve it. They're the stereotypes. And so what if I jump on them? It's all a game anyway, isn't it? They're not real people to you or to me. I was stunned. My friend said I had just become so mean and so vindictive, and that all I did was constantly berate and abuse the elderly. But my friend is real, you see. He's very real to me. He's a real, live, breathing human being, and I was therefore very, very concerned that I had done anything to hurt him or to disappoint him. My friend had just gone through a very rough year, the kind of year that makes you aware of the passing of time, the kind of year that maybe makes you a bit more aware of being old than you might otherwise like to think. Now, you see, my friend is one hell of a lot hipper than I am. He's a very, very cool man. But he's also part of an older generation, a different generation than the one I belong to. And he defends his generation just as I defend mine. He is offended by glib phrases and words that are derogatory and intended to insult and to bite. Things like, you old bag, or you blue hairs, or references to false teeth and walkers and things of that nature. He went on to tell me about the trouble that he's having with his, in essence, false teeth. He wondered if the day would come when he would be in a walker. And I was devastated. Suddenly, all these throwaway lines, all of these empty words hurled at faceless, unreal people on the other end of a telephone were scoring direct hits on a very, very real person. My friend. He went on to say that he didn't listen very much anymore. I was very embarrassed for having put my friend in such a position as to have to tell me that. I gave half-hearted excuses, explaining that, well, I didn't really have a lot of experience with the elderly. I said, my friend, my mother died when she was 60. My grandmother on my father's side died when she was 59. My grandfather on my mother's side died when he was 65. I didn't grow up with old people. I don't have any old aunts. I don't have any old uncles, So forgive me if I don't know how to deal with them. It's not totally my fault. I spent almost the entire night last night thinking about my friend and his generation. I've often talked about how shabbily we treat our elderly in this country. I was talking more in terms of, like making them retire and this kind of stuff. I guess I never really stopped to think very much about what it must be like to be on the other end of those empty phrases, the blue hairs, the old bags, that kind of stuff. I never really thought about that as being mistreatment of the elderly. Never really stopped to think that it hurt. Never before have millions and millions and millions of the most stable citizens in a community just upped and moved off, creating irreparable vacuums and social upheaval.